Virtual summits are the most powerful online marketing tool available to grow your list, launch your platform, make more money, and create an impact in the world, even if you're just getting started. If you are ready to take your summit to the next level, then tune into the Virtual Summit Podcast with Dr. Mark T. Wade.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mark T. Wade, founder of Virtual Summit Software and creator of the One Day Summit Formula. And I'm on a mission to help you, the summit host, get your summit out to the world in a powerful and impactful way. So let's get started. Hey, Summit host, Dr. Mark T. Wade here, founder of Virtual Summit Software and your host here on the Virtual Summit Podcast. We are in for an absolute treat in this episode. We've got the incredible Stefan Dorn with us. He is going to blow some minds today when it comes to interaction and creating safe spaces and experiences inside of your virtual summits. Now, before we jump into that, I just want to say, Stefan, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'd love for you to take a quick moment and tell our summit hosts just a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, Mark, for having me. Great to be on the show. About myself, so I'm the co-founder of a small consulting training firm called Radical Inclusion. We focus mainly on training around online facilitation and remote leadership. So we support remote teams in their development, especially when they're newly created or when there's trouble in them. We do a lot of online facilitation for larger group gatherings. So I'd say 40 plus participants, some what you would call summits as well that are bigger, and then a lot of training for consultants and facilitators and trainers who want to take their presence formats online.
Well, I mean, that is a hot topic right now. I think we've got lots of people doing that. We got lots of our summit hosts right now that are tuning in that are probably in that very same situation, looking to move more into the virtual space through a virtual summit or virtual event. So let's kind of let's just dive right into it. I want to talk about how do we facilitate, how do we create, well, actually, let's start off with what's one of the biggest problems you're seeing happening right now for people who are in the virtual space, who are trying to create a virtual event of some sort. What is one of the biggest challenges or problems you're seeing?
When I look at the events that I'm participating and when I hear what organizers and facilitators tell me, it's really the social piece. So how do you create social closeness in the virtual space? And it's something that doesn't come natural because, communication just changes. It's tool-based. We don't see so much of our posture. And if we pay attention, if we have video, we only always see one person at a time. We don't really sort of see the crowd as a big group. We don't really know how to feel the energy of the group. So it just changes a lot how we interact with the group, not just in a verbal content sense, but in sort of a more of a group dynamics. How do I manage the group dynamics type of sense? And so I think that's the biggest challenge that I hear people talk about.
Yeah, no, I've seen that quite a bit. We're seeing that actually in all kinds of spaces. I mean, everything they call it Zoomzilla, right? Like we're all on Zoom now, which is great because people are open to it, they understand it, they expect it, and they accept it. But now we kind of have to rise to the new set of skills, to the new aspects of that. So with that being said, that challenge of now trying to create closeness, if you will, or the fact that there's the lack of, because we're into this virtual only space, what are some things that you're implementing? What are some things that you're seeing work to help kind of overcome those challenges?
I think, I would summarize it, I think, in three things. So one is, as I said, communication is tool-based. So it's really about looking at what are the digital tools that I'm using? How do I want to use them? So not just thinking about, then I'm going to do a presentation, then I'm going to do small groups, but really thinking through how does that flow for the participants. So almost like you're doing the the client journey for a marketing thing, right? So then they're going to have this, and then they're going to work with that. So really think it through, and then think about, are my participants actually ready to do that? So we've just done a few conferences or bigger workshops on MS Teams, and we are using for those particular instances, we use different channels in Teams as spaces to do group work.
Virtual Summit's software makes hosting a summit easier than ever. The only software in the world designed specifically for hosting a summit lets you set up a summit in a matter of hours with no tech skill or team needed. You can try out the Virtual Summit's software free at virtualsummits.com. But hurry, this is a limited offer.
So you have to ask yourself, how do people get there? Do they know how to click out of the meeting window to get back into the team space? Does the organizer know they have to invite everybody into the team space so people can access the thing? Do they know how to start the call in a channel? How do you guide that? So all that kind of discussion, I think that's the first thing, is because if people feel lost in technology, they're not going to feel like exploring relationships with other people. They're just going to be lost. They can't concentrate on the content, and they can't create social closeness. So that would be the first thing. The second one, I would say, I would subsume in actually creating social closeness, and it happens. For me, there's two ways. One is look at formality versus informality. So what's really hard is if you have very formal processes with very strict, His Excellency so-and-so is now speaking, and, the more the sort of traditional, you have the high CEO coming in, and he has to have a special place, etc. It creates huge distance between the regular employees. They're not going to speak up in a talk to on a camera to another 100 people to ask a question. If there's that kind of an atmosphere, that kind of a distance created by formality. So what you want to do is you want to work with the VIPs in the meeting, so they actually relax more, that they know it, to really take it with a relaxed tone, to maybe use storytelling, show a bit of vulnerability from themselves. And the same goes for the facilitator, you're more of a host of a dinner party than you are of a formal meeting. And for a lot of companies, and public events, that's a real problem. I think it's not a big problem in the remote work crowd. They're used to dealing with each other like that. But when you move into these summits where you have a lot of business people who are used to hierarchy, who are used to this kind of atmosphere, it becomes really, really troublesome. And then the second one, intimacy. So really try and do a lot through small interactions of small groups. And small, I really mean less than 10 people if you can. So even 20, if you have a conference of 200 people and you say, let's do 10 groups, that's 20 people in a group. They're not going to be able to have an intimate conversation online. They probably don't even in a presence meeting. So you want to find ways to reducing it really to very small groups, and intersperse them between. So an example might be what we've done recently with a leadership conference, is that we created what we called travel groups, where they basically formed before the conference, and they met to do technical check-in. So we had them go through a technical guide where they had to test all the things they would need to do in the conference, just 4 people together. And then we had the same, because they were already set up to meet. So we used them to have each day they came together to do a reflection. So before we did the closing every day, we gave them half an hour to just get together and discuss, how was my day? What did I learn? What was good? What are my questions? And then we came back together as the big group and started the closing. So that worked beautifully. They were even in the end, everybody was saying, I'm going to miss my travel group and stuff like that. So that was cool. And then I said 3, right? So the third one is I would call attention and energy management. So really looking at what's the pace that I'm using? Am I switching up things often enough? people already in presence meeting, they tend to go away mentally when, you know, you go over a certain amount of time and it's not that interesting to them. Some people say it's 10 minutes, some people say it's 20 minutes, but it's definitely not an hour. You know, an hour presentation is just a killer. Even in presence, in online, it's even worse, because there's my email and there's so many other interesting things in that box that I'm looking at that I'm just going to lose people immediately. So you're really you don't have to present only 10-minute slots, but maybe work with a partner and change things up so that every 10 minutes somebody else speaks, or ask your audience a question and have them respond on the chat, or, you know, have them, you know, put in smileys about, you know, where's your energy at. That would be some examples that you can just shape things up. And then what I said earlier with small groups, that also really helps to change the pace. Whenever you go into groups, energy just goes up because people are starting to get active, right? So you have to play with these elements to make sure that they're engaged mentally. And then the other thing that we found really useful is to do enough breaks, and to do breaks where you have people move. So, you know, do stretching, have them dance if that's something that's appropriate in your context. Have them do, we had a conference where a participant actually offered laughing yoga. So we did 5 minutes of laughing yoga. Everybody loved it. You can do so many things on camera together, right? And if people feel awkward, they just switch off their camera and you know, do things together anyway. So I think those would be the three things that I would focus on: technology, getting things really right so people feel comfortable with it; social closeness in terms of informality and intimacy; and then energy and attention management. So it's about pace and it's about getting people moving.
This is just great. I want to definitely dive into these a little bit deeper.
Sure.
And just to share, like, I agree with you. And we're just wrapping up our summit talks, which historically in the virtual summit space, you know, virtual summits are primarily pre-recorded.
Yeah.
But with the evolution of what's going on in the virtual event space, virtual summits need to evolve as well. So we've been incorporating live stream components. And I just want to agree with what you're saying here, keeping it. I'm naturally just a little more goofy, or my personality is to relate a little bit more versus.
It helps so much online.
And it does. And I want to kind of, man, there's so many of these I want to jump into. So with the presentation, I agree with you. We're competing not just with their attention span, but with the fact that they literally have everything in front of them that they would rather be doing for the most part, or at least pulled into doing, than you know, listening to a presentation. So
now that they're at home, you also compete with their kids coming in and with the fridge.
Netflix.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I like how you talked about the flow at the very beginning of our conversation here, and about taking breaks. So actually, I've got a deeper question I'm going to go into, but the first question I want to ask is, when it comes to breaks, I know from my own personal experience as well as other summit hosts, one of the fear of giving breaks is that you won't get them back. So what are your thoughts on how to give breaks, and maybe even overcoming that fear if you're doing a live streaming component? And actually, let me set the precedence here for all of our summit hosts listening into this. You should have live streaming components to your summit, even if it's just a live Q&A wrap up at the end of the day.
I agree.
So take this information that Stefan's giving us right now and apply this to your virtual summit. Even it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do a fully live stream virtual summit, although a lot of people are now considering that. But pull this knowledge that he's giving us and see how you can incorporate it into your summit. So Stefan, let's start with breaks. Give us a better understanding of that. What is okay? What's too much? And how do we make sure we don't lose our audience?
So I think first of all, if you have an exciting event, you're not going to lose people because of half an hour break or 15-minute break, right? So I think that's the baseline. If you have really boring talks, they're going to leave anyway, you know, if you do a break or not. So I wouldn't say that it's actually an issue to losing people. you obviously don't want to lose. If you've built up some energy and some momentum and people are really into it, you don't want to lose that. So that I can concede that you might want to pay attention to that. On the other hand, there's a lot of overpacing happening, so that people go too far, and then people are really starting to be overwhelmed by the amount of information they get, by paying attention all that time. It costs a lot of energy, and it is exhausting. So I think that's more the question, is how do I find the right balance so I can keep the energy, the good energy that I'm creating with my content. There's two things I think you can do. One is you should look at what are the likely time zones that I have, so to make sure that the bulk of my people is now on lunchtime, so I need to give them probably a bigger break, because they're going to want to eat. And if I don't give it to them, they're going to leave and go eat anyway, and they might not come back. So there's also the pro of keeping people by giving them a proper break when it's about the time that they need it. And then the second thing that I would say is you can always offer people sort of other spaces where they can mingle. So you could say, for example, we have these 2 or 3 small rooms open. If you don't feel like a break and you want to just mingle and get to know people, hop into those. There can be a topic, or they can be just open networking, whatever. Some of these newer tools that are popping up, these online conference tools, they have that built in, right? So you can actually chat with other individuals. You can even see their profiles, and you can agree to network in a break or not. The other thing is, if you're mixing live and recorded content, you can also make it in a way that some recorded content people might be able to catch at different points of time. So then they can find, I'm going to watch this now because I want to have a break later, for example, right? So you can also play with that giving them more of an agency around this. And then I think that brings me to the final point that came up as you were starting to ask the question, is I think we have to let go of the thought that we can control what the exact experience is that our audience has, and we have to concede that that we have to help them create their own experience. So it's really a lot about giving them the opportunity to self-organize in a way that works for them.
Be sure to check out the speaker management tool inside your virtual summit software, which lets you quickly and easily recruit and manage your speakers on your virtual summit, literally eliminating hundreds of hours of work. Get more information at virtualsummits.com.
That is so true there. You're talking to a control freak over here, so you can't tell me to let go. No, I'm just Stefan. So I want to circle back now to the presentation aspect. I've heard a variety of different people talking about, just like you said, different time limits, different time effects, and how to keep people engaged. I liked your position or your comment about, doesn't necessarily mean you only have 10 minutes and then 10 minutes, but you can change maybe the flow, the pace, or what's happening. I'd love for you to kind of walk us through what is, from a summit host perspective. I do have content. I do have things that I want to get across to my audience. So what are some alternative ways of presenting this that is both effective from keeping attention, entertaining, creating an experience, as well as still getting the information across?
So I think one of the things, the sort of sometimes less is more, that you see, how can I segment segment my presentation in ways that they get, edible chunks, and not, a big sandwich that is weight there that I can't even hold in my hands to bite into it. The other things that come to mind is you can work with visualization very well. So visual images, it's always good when you try and access sort of the people's emotional reaction, and with visualization you can do that. So there are certain images that we see and we immediately remember. We immediately have memories. I'm German, so for example, the fall of the wall in Berlin. If you show me that image, I was 14, so I remember. Yeah, that was that time, and this and that happened. On the on a more negative one, if you show somebody 9/11 pictures, they'll immediately know where they were, what they did, etc. And you can use that. Not obviously, you wouldn't probably use those extreme examples, whether positive or negative, but you can use those things. I think that's why lolcats are so successful, right? Because it just talks to people emotionally. Visualization can also help you understand more complicated concepts. Like buying a furniture from IKEA, if they would write the instruction on an A4 on one page, you wouldn't know how to build this thing, right? But when you see it marked up, it's pretty obvious how it works. So visualization would be one thing. The second thing that I find really works well is storytelling. When you tell a story, as opposed to these are the 3 points that I want you to know, but you tell them these are the 3 points, and here's a story for point 1, and here's a story for point 2, and here's a story for point 3, people listen differently. They're much more engaged. It talks to them in a different way. You can even see how sometimes people's way of looking changes. They just engage differently. And finally, I would say engage them. Right? Ask questions in the chat, for example. You can do things like Mentimeter or other of these tools where you ask them questions that you can visualize the answers to. Do you know Mentimeter? So Mentimeter is a polling tool where people answer on their phones. So you basically give them you share your main screen in screen sharing, and then on top it says the URL they have to go to and a code they have to go to, so they can answer your questions. And then you might ask, do you prefer A, B, or C? And then you can have different visualizations where you can start see an image evolve how your 200 or 300 people are responding to that particular question. And you and the audience get to see, okay, there's 500 people in the room and 400 love B. I wouldn't have expected that, right? And then you can talk about that, for example, as part of your talk. So try and engage, make them do stuff, but not by saying, if anybody has a question, write in the chat. Nobody's going to write anything, or it's always the same people that write something. But ask them concretely what you want from them and how to do it, right? So those are the things that come to mind to spice up a presentation. Generally, I would say a lot of presentations that I see, they are standard presentations that people did at some point, and then they don't really redo them for the specific audience they're talking to. And then you'll have things like, oh yeah, this one is not relevant for you. Let's jump to slide 10. And then they'll lose the track of thought because it's not how they usually present. And, so really you need to prepare also. And you need to think about what's the audience that I'm talking to? What do they need? What's the message that I really want to come across, and not what are the 10 messages? The kind of one-on-ones of presentation. Somehow we seem to forget when we move from, I'm preparing for a TED Talk, I think about all these things. I'm preparing for an online summit, I'll just record something. And maybe you need to help the speakers, to do that better also. Give them more concrete instructions on how to prepare, how to split things up, how to make things more visual, etc.
I think that's a great point there. One, I love what you said right there is like, needing to prepare it, actually do some preparation. Unfortunately, we have to say that, but it is true. They need to do that. And also giving your speakers advice or guidance, like especially right now, shaping how you want that summit to be, I think is important. Like giving the guidance, as you were just saying, Stefan, to your speakers. Now, I want to go into the small group aspects because I do love, I do really think that this is important. I've seen it in the experiences I've run both on my virtual masterminds, but also in my summits when we do, live streaming components, putting people into breakouts definitely increases interaction. I always get worried. I'm always like, man, they're not going to have anything to talk about, or,
They always have.
So talk us through some of the things that we like, maybe just a couple things that come to mind, or a couple of strategies you use that are good when putting attendees or putting your groups into small groups, things they can work on, things they can do.
So I think the first thing is that a lot of times we underestimate how much we need to process information. Most of us need to talk to somebody else. It's not just I hear it, I internalize it, and then I know whatever the message was that this person wanted to give me. So small group interaction really helps people to process the information that they've just heard. So if they've heard a half-hour presentation and you then give them 15 or 20 minutes to talk in a smaller group, it can be just about, what stood out for you. It can just be questions that help them recall what was said and discuss that with other people. And they'll be happy and they'll have a lot to talk about. The two things that I think you need to really think about when you do groups in an online space is, and that really depends on the tool, how do you get people the instructions that you're giving them? Because in a lot of like if you're using Zoom, for example, and you send them in breakout groups, they come into the breakout room with nothing, right? So at the very least, you have to tell them, take a screenshot of these instructions or of this main question and take it with you so you remember what you're supposed to talk about. In another way you could do, if you have a conference website, you could sort of put in a link and say, here are the instructions. Just go on that link and you'll see what you're supposed to do in the group. And you can even give them a more structured process of saying, take 10 minutes to do an introductory round of everybody says who they are, then agree on whoever takes notes if you want notes out of the discussion, and then somebody who's going to watch the time so you're not all surprised when I haul you all back. And then here's the main question that you're going to discuss or whatever. So that's the first thing. How do you give them the instruction, not just beforehand, but actually in the group? They're going to have, most of them not going to know what they're supposed to do. And then the second thing is, what are you doing with what's coming out of the groups? So how are you getting what happens in the groups back into your main room? And there might be instances where you're doing really small exchanges that are more of a networking type, where you don't really need to take it out. But when you're having content interaction on a presentation or on a topical question, people will expect that they're going to share it afterwards.
With the Ever Summit feature inside the Virtual Summit software, you can rerun your summit as if it were live, ongoing forever with one click of a button. This now lets you continue to use your summit forever, bringing in qualified and engaged leads every month into your business. Get more information at virtualsummit.com.
And you want to avoid the typical sharing out group type thing that we have in a lot of presence meetings, is it's just boring, right? When have 10 groups and then every group gets 5 minutes to talk us through the main points, and by the second or third group you already start to have doubles, but they insist in telling you everything that they did in their groups. So one of the things that we've done a few times is to use some whiteboarding tool. I really liked to use Padlet for that, and I used that a couple of times. But it can be, Mural or Miro or whatever the tool is, where you prepare a place where they can put the gems of the discussion. Like they have space to put 3 things, for example, and then you tell them in the instructions, so 5 minutes before the end, at this time, you go there, you agree on the 3 main things, and you place them there. And then as a whole group, you can go to that place and you can look at it together, give people 5 minutes to read through it, to have a look. And then you as the moderator or the presenter can pick out the few things that they find interesting and either riff off of them again and do some more talking, or ask questions back to the audience, or whatever the next step is that you want to take. But then they get to share, and you don't have that sort of half hour, now we're listening to group 5 and now we're listening to group 6. And
yeah, we definitely, I mean, I can just imagine right now that happens in real, like in person. And I can only imagine, it's like just like nails on a chalkboard. Once it's virtual, it's like, we do not have to sit through this.
No, you lose people, basically. I mean, virtual, what happens is people are frustrated for a little bit, and then they're gone.
They're gone. And even if they're there, they're just on their phone or they're doing something
exactly.
else. So I love that. Now,
or daydreaming.
Did you say day drinking or day dreaming?
Dreaming.
I was like, day drinking, exactly.
They will want to do that. Yeah.
Oh man, Stefan, this has been incredible. We're going to be wrapping up here shortly. Before we do, I know everybody's sitting there going, Mark, how can I get in touch with Stefan? Where is he at? How do I get more of him in my life? So why don't you let everybody know where you're hanging out and the best way to get in touch with you?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I publish not as consistently as regularly as I want to, but if you want to follow some of the stuff that I'm writing about, that's a good place. Just search for my name. I don't think there's anybody else, or otherwise it's SDOHRN is my username. And then for the work I do, radical inclusion. So it's radical-inclusion.com is where you find me and my partners.
Excellent. Make sure you go hit up Stefan and let him know how much you enjoyed this episode. I'm going to let you leave us with some final parting pieces of wisdom for our summit hosts who are out there trying to put on an excellent virtual summit. Stefan, what would you leave them with?
Well, first of all, saying that I think it's awesome that everybody is jumping on this, and that there's so much experimentation going on as well. I can tell you whatever I want to, but in the end, you just have to try it out and experiment. It's really amazing what you can do. The tools are evolving as well. So every month there's something new that you can try out. So I really encourage people to just jump and try things. Get a bunch of 5 or 10 people together and try things out and see how it works, and then invite 10 more to try it again, and eventually you have 100 or 200 that are in your summit. And that's also what we've talked. We didn't really talk about safe space at all. We started off with let's talk about safe space. But what we what I shared with you, what we talked about, is really all around making people feel comfortable that they can contribute in the best way possible. Because when we don't feel comfortable, when we feel sort of reserved, etc., we're very likely checking out. And so make people comfortable. Be a good host, like you would in your birthday party.
Such great advice right there, Stefan. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Summit hosts, for hanging out with Stefan and I. I'm Dr. Mark T. Wade, your host here on the Virtual Summit Podcast. Remember, your message matters. So go out there and make an impact in the world, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening. Now don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on the Virtual Summit Podcast. Head over to the show notes to check out all the links and resources from this episode, and be sure to grab your free trial of the Virtual Summit software.
Now, I want to end this episode by saying to all the Summit hosts listening right now, I believe in you, and you can do this. Summits are by far one of the most powerful ways to quickly grow your list, launch your platform, make more money, and most importantly, make an impact in the world, even if you're just getting started. So don't get caught up in analysis paralysis, because the world needs to hear your message, and there are people who are waiting for you to help them. So just get started, because imperfect action is always better than no action. Thank you, and see you on the next episode.